I used to believe that if I loved my son enough, one day he would learn to be grateful. But I never imagined that the same son, whom I raised with my own hands, would secretly take out a massive life insurance policy on me, and then plot to make my death look like an unfortunate accident during a supposed hiking trip. What he didn't know was that I was the one who set the real plan in motion. "Ethan, I just transferred $30,000 to your account." I called my son, Ethan Dawson, with the same sweetness as always. "Make sure you get Chloe some good supplements. Take care of her and the baby, all right?" Ethan immediately laughed, his tone upbeat and natural, as if he had always been the loving husband and grateful son he pretended to be. "Of course, Mom. I'm about to be a dad. Trust me. I'll take good care of Chloe and our little treasure." I was about to say something more, maybe just to linger in that moment a bit longer, when he cut me off abruptly. "Well, Mom, I have to go. I've got a pressing matter to deal with over here." Not a trace of gratitude in his voice. Not even a simple thank you. I swallowed the hint of disappointment, forcing a gentle response. "All right then. I love you, honey." But just as I was about to hang up, I heard the sentence that would echo in my mind for the rest of my life. Finally, the old woman sent the money. My heart sank. It was Chloe's voice. I stood frozen, holding my breath, still clinging to a sliver of hope. Maybe Ethan would say something, anything, to defend me, even a half-hearted word. But I couldn't have been more wrong. Ethan scoffed, his tone sharp and dismissive. "She's just too cautious. We had to fake a pregnancy just to get that money out of her." My fingers began to tremble, unconsciously tightening their grip on the phone. In that instant, all my warm memories shattered like brittle glass, leaving only an intense cold in my chest. Ethan had always been reckless with money. Before he got married, he would constantly come to me for handouts, sometimes hundreds, sometimes thousands, even tens of thousands of dollars, and I always helped him. When he racked up gambling debts, I was the one who cleaned up his messes, one after another. But I wasn't naive. I knew what he was like. I always held a little back, kept a safety net just in case. This time, however, I had let my guard down completely, because he said Chloe was pregnant. And now, I finally saw the truth for what it was, a truth colder than winter, sharper than any knife. After the wedding, Ethan rarely came to see me. The calls grew scarcer. I told myself he was just busy, that married life was demanding. I made 1,000 excuses for him. But today, I realized I had never mattered in his world. Through the phone, I could hear Chloe's cheerful voice, chattering with Ethan about how they should spend my money. I stood paralyzed in the middle of the living room, the phone still in my hand, as a deep silence rang in my ears, as if the whole world was laughing at me. It was only when the line finally went dead that I realized I regretted everything. But the tragedy was that realization came far too late. What I didn't expect was that just 2 days later, Ethan showed up at my door. After living alone for so many years, the sound of the doorbell was almost unfamiliar. I rubbed my eyes, walked to the door, and opened it. There stood Ethan, with Chloe by his side. "Ethan?" I offered a warm smile, trying to keep my tone as natural as possible. "What brings you here today?" He smiled as if everything were perfectly normal, handed me a bag with something in it, and placed it in my arms without a second thought. "I had the day off, and thought I'd stop by to see how you're doing," he said breezily. "I also brought you some supplements, figured you could use a little boost to stay healthy." Chloe quickly chimed in, flashing that polished, perfectly rehearsed smile. "Eleanor, you have no idea. Ethan talks about you all the time at home. It's just that he's been so busy, he hasn't had a chance to visit." I looked at them both and couldn't help but laugh to myself. They were really committed to the performance, playing their parts to perfection. Well then, if they wanted to act, I had no problem joining in. "Just the thought means so much to me," I said softly, patting Ethan's arm. "Come on in." As soon as he entered the living room, Ethan motioned for me to sit. "Mom, don't just stand there. Let's chat for a bit." I already had a feeling this visit wasn't just a friendly check-in. And sure enough, he scratched his head with that deliberate casualness, glanced sideways at Chloe, and then said, almost offhandedly, "So, you know Chloe's pregnant. The apartment we're living in is just too small. We were thinking, maybe we could move in with you for a while. I didn't answer right away. I just looked at them and smiled faintly. Chloe quickly jumped in, letting out a soft sigh, as if the thought pained her. It's been so tough, Eleanor. The place is so cramped, and with the baby coming, it's not healthy for me or the baby. There it was. They had been eyeing this house for a long time. The single-family home I live in is near downtown, quiet, safe, with everything nearby. The property value long ago surpassed $1 million. Ethan grew up here. He knows exactly what it's worth. I nodded slightly, my voice calm. Of course, you can. Ethan's eyes lit up instantly, though something in his face indicated he wasn't quite satisfied yet. He hesitated, then pushed a little further, testing the waters. Well, since we're going to be living here anyway, maybe it makes sense to put the house in my name. That way I can handle the property taxes and the upkeep, and you can be free of that responsibility. Chloe continued sweetly, her voice soft, almost patronizing. Exactly, Eleanor. We're family, right? You've done enough. You should be taking it easy, not worrying about household chores and bills. Listening to their little duet, I felt a strange sense of detachment, even amusement. There was a time I would have agonized over Ethan's every request, giving up everything for him. But now he acted as if everything I owned was his by default, as if he just needed to say, "You're my mom," and I would roll over and hand him the world. But this time, there wasn't the slightest ripple in my heart. "Sure," I said softly. Ethan froze for an instant. Chloe's expression shifted, surprise flashing in her eyes, as if they hadn't expected it to be so easy. I just pressed my lips together and still smiled as I looked at them. Go on then. Keep up your little show. I'm curious to see just how far you think you can push this. Ever since I agreed to let Ethan and Chloe move in, the atmosphere in the house had shifted, subtle but unmistakable. On their second day here, Chloe was eager to curl up next to me on the couch that practiced saccharine smile in place. "Eleanor," she said sweetly, "how's the transfer coming along?" I looked at her and sighed gently. It's still a few days away. The process is a bit more complicated than I expected. Her smile tightened for a fraction of a second, just a flash, but she recovered quickly with a breezy laugh. "That's okay. We're in no rush. We'll wait." Of course, they would wait. They had no other choice. Until the paperwork was finalized, the house was still legally mine. From that day on, their behavior transformed into something disturbingly wholesome. Chloe started waking up early to make me breakfast. Ethan, who hadn't lifted a finger in years, suddenly offered to clean the kitchen. Every word, every gesture, was steeped in sweetness, the perfect portrait of a caring daughter-in-law and a considerate son. But I knew better. It was all a performance. They were just biding their time. Ethan had never been the type to serve anyone. As a child, he treated me like a maid, expecting meals and favors as if they were his birthright. As an adult, he barely bothered to call, let alone show me any affection. And now, suddenly, he was wiping down my dining table? What a joke. I had dedicated my life to raising him, sacrificed everything for his future, and in return, he saw me as nothing more than a goldmine to be exploited. That night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, tormented by a question that wouldn't leave me. Was I being too cold? Too cruel? But if I were truly cold, would I have forgiven him so many times? Would I have bent over backward to give him chance after chance? I kept hoping he would change. I kept believing that, somehow, heartfelt motherly love could cure anything. And just as I was wondering if I had pushed things too far, I heard whispers coming from the living room. I'm not one to eavesdrop, but in that moment, something compelled me to move, slowly and smoothly, toward the door. I pressed my ear against the wood, and what I heard became a memory I could never erase. As soon as we rent the house out, Ethan said, his voice low and cold, "We'll kick her out." I froze. Chloe chuckled, barely containing her excitement. Exactly. And by then, her entire inheritance should be ours anyway. My mother? Ethan scoffed. She means nothing to me. She's just dead weight. Now that I have you, what do I need her for? A chill shot down my spine. This was the child I loved with everything I had? I held our home together. I raised him, watched him grow. I bailed him out of every trouble, every debt. And now, in his eyes, I was nothing but a burden. What did I do so wrong? What did I do to raise such an ungrateful, cruel man? Perhaps I loved him too much. Perhaps I gave of myself too freely, believing that love was built on selfless sacrifice. And perhaps that sacrifice taught him he was entitled to everything. My mind drifted to a memory I hadn't visited in years. Ethan was still in college the first time he got into gambling. He racked up tens of thousands of dollars in debt before I found out. When the collectors came knocking, I realized how far he had fallen. He knelt at my feet, sobbing, begging me to save him, swearing he would never gamble again, and I believed him, all too easily. I cut him off from his bank accounts, confined him to the house, hoping he would finally see the damage he was doing. But instead, he flew into a rage. He smashed things, kicked doors, and screamed threats. "If you keep this up, I'll kill myself," he yelled. Still, I couldn't give up on him. I wanted so badly to believe there was hope, until one day I brought him a bowl of hot soup. He snatched it from my hands and threw it in my face. The boiling liquid scorched my arm, leaving it red and raw. He stood over me, seething. "How long do you plan to torture me?" I remember kneeling there in silence, cleaning up the broken bowl and spilled soup as my skin blistered, saying nothing. Was it wrong to save him? To give him another chance? Or was my real mistake believing that someone so emotionally vacant could ever learn to love? Now, on the surface, his life seemed more put together than ever, but he had only grown colder, more calculating, more greedy. In his eyes, I was already worthless. That night, I finally cried myself to sleep. What I didn't know was that something even crueler was waiting for me just around the corner. Morning light filtered through the blinds, casting soft rays across the room as I slowly opened my eyes. Out of habit, I turned to the edge of the bed. Goofy? The rug beside the bed was empty, no sign of the old companion who would curl up at my feet every morning and wake me with his little wet nose. A tight knot formed in my chest. I sat up, threw off the blanket, and instinctively looked toward the bedroom door. By now, Goofy should have been there waiting, tail wagging, ready for our usual morning walk around the yard. But today, he wasn't. "Goofy? Come here, boy." I clapped my hands and walked to the door, scanning the living room. I looked near the sofa, under the dining table, by the stairs, nothing. I went to the kitchen. His water bowl by the fridge was still full, which meant he'd been home last night. But his food dish was empty. A wave of unease began to rise in my chest. "Goofy!" I called again, my voice louder, as I walked to the back door. I stepped into the yard. The freshly cut grass glistened with dew. The morning air smelled of earth, but I couldn't enjoy it. "Goofy! Come on! This isn't funny!" My voice echoed in the silence, but only the chirping of birds answered. My fingertips went cold. That lingering anxiety had morphed into something darker fear. I rushed back inside, searching every room. I looked behind the couch, under the bed, in closets, behind bathroom doors. Still nothing. Finally, I approached his dog bed. Empty. That little corner, once cluttered with old blankets, chew toys, and his favorite squeaky ball, was now spotless, as if no dog had ever lived there. That's when I understood. He hadn't wandered off. He had been taken. A shiver ran down my spine, like a knife tracing the length of my back. I turned and walked into the living room. Ethan and Chloe were sitting at the dining table, eating breakfast without a care in the world. Chloe was dragging her manicured nails against her plate, making an annoying scraping sound. I paused, trying to keep my voice steady. "Ethan, Chloe, have either of you seen Goofy?" Ethan didn't even look up. He took a bite of bacon and waved his hand dismissively. "Oh, the dog? I took him out this morning and just left him somewhere." A deafening roar exploded in my mind, as if my entire body had been hollowed out in a single blow. "What?" My voice came out as a choked whisper. I dug my nails into my palms as I fought for control. Ethan finally looked up, chewing his food with lazy indifference. He's just an old dog, always underfoot. I figured the house would be a lot quieter without him. My ears were ringing. My stomach felt like it had been punched. "You have no idea what he meant to me," I said, my voice trembling, my fingertips pale and shaking. He shrugged, completely unfazed. Come on, Mom, don't make such a big deal out of it. You're 60 years old. What are you doing with a dog? You've wasted 12 years and who knows how much money on that mutt. I did you a favor. Now you don't have to deal with it anymore. I stared at him, my lips trembling, speechless. Chloe put her fork down, dabbed her mouth with a napkin, and said matter-of-factly, Honestly, Eleanor, you should be thanking Ethan. He made the right decision for you. I didn't respond. I just stood there, frozen. My eyes fell on the coffee table, where an old, faded photograph Saturday. In it, I was sitting on the couch, holding a 1-year-old Goofy in my arms, smiling with a warmth I still vividly remembered. That dog had been my comfort, my companion, my only constant, and now he had been taken from me, without a shred of remorse. The morning sun streamed in through the windows, but I had never felt so cold. It was as if my heart had finally shattered, collapsing into a void so dark and deep, I couldn't even find the bottom. Ethan had hurt me before. I had swallowed the pain. I had accepted that I had raised an ungrateful, selfish man. But I never thought the final blow, the one that would finally break me, would come from a dog. In that moment, I understood something with painful clarity. It was time to cut ties with this charade of a mother-son bond, once and for all. As I turned away from the dining table, Ethan and Chloe still showed no sign of remorse. Rather, they seemed to believe their behavior was perfectly justified. I spent the entire afternoon sitting quietly in my room, as my heart slowly returned to a state of eerie calm. Goofy, if you were still here, I'd want you to see this, to see how they will pay for their cruelty. The next day, I returned home with a document carefully disguised as a house transfer agreement, smiling as I handed it to Ethan. It's all done, I said calmly. Consider it a gift for your little family. Ethan's eyes lit up instantly. He snatched the papers from my hand as if he'd won the lottery, his voice thick with excitement. The noise brought Chloe running downstairs, her face radiant with barely concealed delight. She leaned over to scan the document quickly, her grin widening with every second. But as she reached the last page, her expression faded, just slightly. Her eyes narrowed, and a flicker of suspicion passed through them. Then she plopped down on the couch, crossed her legs, and settled into the posture of a woman in complete control. Well, I guess this house is ours now. So, when are you moving out? Just as I expected. I blinked in feigned surprise. Moving out? Where would I go? Chloe shrugged, her voice colder than ever, dismissing any pretense of family obligation. That's your problem, not ours. We're not responsible for where you live. I turned to Ethan with a calculated plea in my eyes. I really have nowhere to go. Couldn't I just stay here for a little while? He looked away, avoiding my gaze. There are plenty of rentals out there. Find a place. But I couldn't leave. Not yet. Not until everything was in place. I gently took his arm, my voice soft and restrained. I've taken such good care of you here. I can keep cooking, cleaning. I won't be any trouble. Chloe frowned, clearly weighing the pros and cons, and nodded dismissively. Fine, let her stay for now. At least she's useful. At this point, she already saw herself as the lady of the house. Ethan, seeing her agree, didn't bother to argue. Yeah, whatever, just stay. I lowered my head, hiding the smile that played at the corners of my lips. The more relaxed they were, the easier it would be to expose them. The truth was, I had been on to them for a long time, ever since the wedding preparations, when Ethan spent my last dime to meet Chloe's extravagant demands, the expensive ceremony, the luxury car, the apartment down payment. I paid for it all. And now, here I was again, back in my own house, playing the part of an unpaid maid. From that day on, Chloe no longer hid her sense of entitlement. Get me some water, she yelled one afternoon, slamming her palm on the table as if summoning a servant. Seriously, you're getting worse at this. I forced a tight smile and brought her the water. She took a sip and then immediately spat it out, splashing me in the process. Are you trying to burn me alive? Me and the baby? The rage that surged through me nearly shattered my composure, but I managed a faint smile. I'm sorry. I'll get you another one. She clicked her tongue in annoyance and waved me away. Forget it. Go to the grocery store. Make something decent for dinner. I nodded, picked up the shopping bags, and walked out the door. But the moment I crossed that threshold, a plan had already formed in my mind. I drove to the store, calmly selecting ingredients as I assembled my version of a revenge menu. No, it wouldn't be cheap tricks like greasy fast food or sugary desserts. That was too obvious, too easy to trace. No, I would serve them something far more useful, far more effective. I filled my cart with comfort food-rich, high-calorie dishes, addictive and deceptively indulgent, creamy mashed potatoes, buttered toast, baked mac and cheese, duck confit, sweet pumpkin soup, and, of course, all their favorite processed meats and high-sodium sauces, everything they loved, everything that seemed comforting and nourishing, but would slowly weigh them down, cloud their minds, and dull their bodies. That night, I prepared a full feast. Ethan devoured the cheesy casseroles and risotto like a starving animal, laughing between bites. Mom, you're a better cook than ever. Chloe sipped the thick, oily pumpkin cream soup I'd made especially for her, a look of satisfaction on her face. It seems keeping you around was a smart move after all. Eat up, you two, I said sweetly, serving them more food. You've both seemed a little underweight lately. I watched them gorge themselves, suppressing the grim smile growing in my chest. They didn't notice a thing, not the trap that was slowly closing around them, not the fatigue that would soon set in, not the fog that would begin to cloud their judgment. And me? I just kept cooking, the next day, and the next. I followed the same pattern, meal after meal. The more they ate, the calmer I felt. Every bite brought me one step closer, but just when everything seemed to be taking shape, something threw my plan off course. While tidying the living room, I happened to glance at Ethan's laptop, which was open on the couch, and in the next second, my blood ran cold. As I was tidying up the living room, my gaze drifted to Ethan's open laptop. He must have forgotten to close it. The screen was still on, paused on a browser window. I hadn't intended to snoop, but the words on the screen stopped me cold. How to take out a high-value life insurance policy for an elderly relative. Common methods for a disappearance to go undetected. How to reassign the beneficiary of a trust after their passing. I'd barely read a few lines before a chill raced up my spine, settling like ice in my back. In that moment, I knew with absolute certainty my life had been reduced to a simple dollar amount. A target with a payout. Maybe it was fate. Maybe it was sheer luck. But that accidental glance might have just saved my life. Without hesitation, I grabbed my coat and went straight to the insurance office. Sitting at the front desk, I tried to keep my voice steady. Hello, I'd like to inquire if anyone has taken out a policy in my name. The clerk typed for a few moments, then pulled up a file. Yes, Mrs. Dawson, he nodded. There is indeed a high-value life insurance policy registered under your name, premium grade, to be exact. One of the most expensive plans we offer. I took the document with trembling fingers. My hands were ice cold. I didn't need any more proof. I knew exactly what Ethan and Chloe were planning. To them, I wasn't family, I was a payout waiting to be collected. When I got home, they were lounging on the sofa, waiting for me as if nothing had happened. Ethan, surprisingly, got up to greet me. He even took my purse with that familiar false warmth. Hey, Mom, you must be exhausted from running around today. He always acted like a dutiful son when he needed something. I kept my expression flat as I sat down. What's all this about? Ethan scratched his head, trying to look carefree. We were thinking maybe we could take you to the National Forest tomorrow. Hike a few trails, get some fresh air, a change of scenery. Chloe immediately chimed in, placing a gentle hand on my back, her voice full of contrition. I've been so moody lately, snapping at you for no reason. I'm so sorry, Eleanor. I thought it would be good for us to reset and have some quiet time together. I almost laughed out loud at the performance. If I hadn't already discovered their plan, I might have actually believed this little charade of affection. But I smiled and nodded. Sure, that sounds lovely. I'll go. They were both momentarily stunned by how easily I agreed. Chloe was the first to recover, quickly smiling and ushering me to my room. Great. Then you'd better go pack, we're leaving early. I didn't answer. I just went to my room and locked the door. Sitting on the edge of the bed, I stared at the empty backpack, my hands slowly curling into fists. I already knew what they intended to do. But what they didn't know was that I had started planning long before they did. It wasn't just them who were waiting for tomorrow, so was I. Only, the ending wasn't going to be the one they imagined. After breakfast, we set off. I sat quietly in the passenger seat of Ethan's car, watching the landscape grow more and more desolate as we left the city behind. The farther we drove, the calmer my heart became, a stillness that felt almost sinister. They had chosen a remote state park on the outskirts of the city. I had heard of it. Every year, there were reports of hikers mysteriously disappearing or accidentally falling from cliffs. Treacherous terrain, unmonitored trails, the place had earned a bad reputation among locals. Ethan knew exactly what kind of place this was. That's precisely why he chose it, and so did I. We're here, he said, pulling to a stop near the base of the mountain. As I stepped out, a sharp chill ran down my spine, despite the daylight. Chloe immediately looped her arm through mine, her voice overly cheerful. Eleanor, what are you spacing out for? Come on, don't be a buzzkill. I returned a warm smile. Of course. We came here to relax today, right? We started up the steep trail, climbing higher and higher until the sun stained the sky a brilliant crimson. When we finally stopped to rest near a scenic overlook, we were just a few steps from the summit. Ethan pointed to a large rock. Mom, sit down, catch your breath. He reached into his pack, pulled out a drink, and handed it to me. It's an electrolyte drink. I thought it might help you recharge. I took the bottle with a grateful nod and brought it to my lips, just enough to make it look like I was drinking. I didn't swallow a single drop. As I lowered the bottle, I saw a fleeting glance pass between Ethan and Chloe. That self-satisfied smirk at the corners of their mouths confirmed what I already knew. Perfect. I pulled 2 energy bars from my own pack and offered them. You two should have something as well. It's been a long climb. They took the bars eagerly, tearing open the wrappers without a second thought. So eager, in fact, they didn't even notice the faint tear marks I had carefully concealed on the packaging. I sat quietly on the rock, pretending to rest. Then I let my body go limp and slumped to the ground. Right on cue, I heard Chloe's delighted laugh. She drank it. That was way too easy. Ethan's voice followed, colder than ever. I'm sorry, Mom, but I need the insurance money. I felt them begin to drag me toward the edge, probably aiming for a spot off the trail, somewhere no one would easily find a body. I counted silently in my head. 3, 2, 1. Then, a sudden noise. 2 heavy thuds hit the ground behind me. I opened my eyes and slowly pushed myself up, dusting off my clothes. They were lying unconscious on the ground. You see, I never drank that electrolyte concoction. I was only pretending. The real trick was in the energy bars, laced with the very same sedatives they had stashed at home. Over the past few days, I had quietly found their hiding spot, snuck a little out, and today I simply returned it. Trying to set me up? You're far too naive. I gave them one last, cold, sharp look, then slung my pack over my shoulder and started walking back down the mountain. As night fell, the temperature would drop sharply. Wild animals often roamed these trails. If they didn't find their way back before dark, well, that would be a lesson for them to learn. Let them have a taste of real survival for once. I hummed to myself as I descended, step by step. Just as I neared the trailhead, I suddenly heard faint, broken cries for help. I stopped in my tracks, turned toward the sound, and carefully pushed through the underbrush. There, lying in the thicket, was a man, his leg clearly injured, his face pale and eyes glazed with pain. He looked to be about my age. His voice trembled. Can you call for help? I didn't hesitate. I called for emergency services and stayed by his side until an ambulance arrived. At the hospital, I sat quietly in the waiting room as he was taken into the emergency room. A while later, a doctor came out. He's going to be fine. He's out of danger. When he finally regained consciousness, I heard his name clearly for the first time. Thank you, he said softly. I'm Leonard Graham, CEO of the Graham Group. My heart skipped a beat. The Graham Group, the very company Ethan's firm had been desperately trying to secure investment from. How interesting. Fate never misses its timing. I never mentioned the connection between Leonard and Ethan. "You saved my life," Leonard said from his hospital bed, still weak, but gripping my hand with surprising strength. "If you ever need anything at all, just ask. I'll do whatever I can." I smiled sweetly and patted the back of his hand. I was just there. Doing the right thing doesn't always require a reward. He spoke with such sincerity, but I preferred to keep this unexpected encounter to myself. A silent turn of fate I'd rather treasure privately. As I stood to leave, I saw the hallway outside his room was already bustling executives, assistants, friends, all rushing to check on him. Even lying in that hospital bed, Leonard had the calm authority of a man used to commanding a room. He wasn't just another patient, he was someone important. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something in my chest loosen. A weight had been lifted. I didn't know if Ethan and Chloe had made it back from the mountain safely. But, strangely enough, I was in no hurry to find out. Ethan had probably never imagined, not even for a second, that his frail, elderly mother was actually a longtime member of a local mountaineering club. I was trained in wilderness first aid and was in better physical shape than most people half my age. I slept like a baby that night. When I woke the next morning, sunlight was spilling gently onto my pillow. The clock read 10 o'clock. I picked up my phone and urgently dialed, my voice shaky and breathless. "Hello. Please, you have to help me. My son and daughter-in-law went hiking at Sablarilla yesterday. They haven't come back. I'm so worried. Please find them." The operator's voice instantly turned serious. "Ma'am, please stay calm. We'll dispatch a search team immediately." 5 hours later, I got the call. "We found them." I took my time getting to the hospital. When I pushed open the door to their room, I found Ethan and Chloe lying in their beds, pale and gaunt like a pair of drenched stray cats. Ethan turned his head weakly. "Mom, where did you go?" I blinked innocently, keeping my voice soft. "I'm not sure. I just remember waking up in a hospital room." I pulled up my pant leg, revealing a neatly wrapped ankle bandage. The doctor said it was just a mild sprain. Chloe gasped, still short of breath. We passed out, just suddenly. It doesn't make any sense." I quickly waved my hand, interrupting her with a look of shock and hurt. "What are you saying? Why would I do something like that? I love you both. I've been so worried." Ethan frowned, as if trying to piece the puzzle together, but said nothing. "Forget it," he finally muttered, slumping back onto his pillow, defeated. During their hospital stay, Chloe didn't miss a beat getting back to her old self. "I'm craving Boston lobster today. Tomorrow I want abalone soup. I need to be nourished." Before, I would have gently reminded her to eat light, but not now. I just smiled, nodded, and went to the kitchen. I prepared everything just as she liked it, and I added a rich chicken soup every single day, never skipping a portion. She drank it down with satisfaction, and I watched, quietly pleased. The day they were discharged, I knew this charade had reached its final act. Ethan returned to his company beaming with hope, only to be stopped by security at the entrance. "I work here. Why can't I get in?" he demanded. The guard didn't budge. "The system is correct. You've been terminated." Ethan froze. He sent frantic messages to the company executives, only to receive a curt reply. "Your position has been terminated. The company no longer requires your services." It hit him like a ton of bricks. He came home in a daze and collapsed on the sofa, his eyes sunken. I looked at him nonchalantly. "Tough day. You look upset." He pressed his lips together. He clenched his fists. Then, unable to hold back, he burst out. "Am I really that useless? Why would they fire me?" I walked over and patted his head gently. "Don't be discouraged. I have money. I'll take care of you both. You shouldn't stress about work anymore. In fact, why don't I send you on a vacation? Clear your heads a bit. How does that sound?" He looked up, surprised by the offer, a flicker of hesitation in his eyes. But then he nodded. "Yeah, maybe that's not a bad idea." Of course he said yes. I knew him too well. He never turned down anything that looked like an easy perk. Chloe chimed in enthusiastically. A vacation sounds perfect. We deserve a break. And just like that, I booked them a 7-day trip to Thailand. They had no idea this was my last gift to them, a final, silent, calculated act of kindness. As for me, I was already turning the page to a new chapter. Leonard's business card was tucked away in my drawer, waiting. He had called me a few days after the hospital, asking to see me again. "I still owe you dinner," he said warmly. "Not just to thank you, I genuinely want to see you again." I ran my fingers over the embossed letters on that card, feeling a softness in my heart I hadn't felt in years. Maybe, just maybe, my real life was only just beginning. The first thing Ethan did after landing in Thailand was send me a message asking for travel money. I transferred the funds without hesitation, and even added with a smile, "If it's not enough, just let me know." That single sentence completely unleashed their spending. From a few thousand to tens of thousands, from fancy restaurants to luxury boutiques, they indulged without restraint, and every time I sent them the money, generously. Meanwhile, back home, I began to clean them out piece by piece. I hired a moving company, packed up every last item they owned, clothes, junk, anything with their scent on it, and sent it to the community donation center. Anything minimally valuable, I donated to charity. I left nothing. Then I changed the locks. By the time they returned from their so-called luxury vacation, my house cleaning was complete, every step perfectly executed. As soon as they got off the plane, I sent them the final blow, a detailed bill for everything they had spent on the trip. Every item, every dollar, clearly marked. Borrower, Ethan Dawson. Because none of that money had come from my personal accounts. I had simply fronted it all through Ethan's line of credit, maxed it out, just like he liked to do with everything in life. I just followed his instructions and let him foot the bill. They believed my money was theirs for the taking. But there's no such thing as a free lunch. Ethan's call came quickly, his voice laced with panic and fury. "What the hell is this? What are these bills you sent me?" My voice was calm. "The money you spent, Ethan, it's yours to pay back." He paused, stunned, before he erupted. "I'm your son. Isn't it normal for me to spend your money?" I let out a soft chuckle. "Really? You still remember I'm your mother? Tell me, aside from when you needed money, have you ever once looked me in the eye and said, 'I love you, Mom'?" I hung up. An hour later, the doorbell began ringing furiously. Then, pounding. Ethan's fists hammered against the door. "Mom, open up. Do you hear me?" Chloe's voice followed, shrill and furious. "Is this your way of cutting off your own son? What kind of mother does this?" I walked slowly to the door and opened it, just enough to block the entrance with my body. Ethan immediately tried to force his way in, but I stood my ground. "Excuse me, what do you think you're doing? This isn't your house." His eyes blazed. "What do you mean? You gave us this house." Chloe sneered, her arms crossed. "Don't get cocky. We let you stay here out of kindness." I let out a cold laugh and threw a folder directly at Ethan's face. "Take a look. Whose name is on the deed?" Ethan opened the folder. His face went pale as he read. This can't be." Chloe snatched it from his hands, flipping through the pages until her fingers trembled. "It still says your name? You tricked us?" I raised an eyebrow. "You were in such a rush to collect on your inheritance you didn't even read the fine print. That document you signed? Just a non-binding property transfer intent form. It has no legal standing." His face went ashen. "Why? Why would you give us a fake contract?" I smiled faintly. "Because you were too busy celebrating to notice the last line, 'for display purposes only.' Not a legally binding transfer of property." Ethan lost it, shoving me hard. "I am your son. How could you do this to me?" I steadied myself and then, calmly, reached into a drawer and pulled out another envelope. "You are not my son." He froze, the color draining completely from his face. I handed him the envelope. "This is the paternity test report. Your biological mother was the woman who broke up my marriage. She had you and then disappeared. Your pathetic father was kicked out of my life for it. But I took you in. I raised you. I gave you a home, a name, an education. I paid your debts, bought you a house, gave you a family. I never had another child because I gave you everything. And what did you give me in return? Ethan slumped to the floor as if his spine had been broken, muttering softly. No, no, you're lying. This can't be real. I crouched down, looked him in the eyes, and said quietly, I've done more than enough for you. Now pay what you owe and get out of my house. Then I turned to Chloe. Oh, and that drink on the mountain? I never touched it. You two drank your own medicine. I was just returning it to its rightful owners. With that, I slammed the door shut behind me. Outside, Ethan's sobs broke the silence, deep, ragged, the sound of someone who had finally woken up, but far too late. And me? I was finally standing on the threshold of my own life, and I didn't look back. My whole life, I believed I had been a good mother. When he went astray, I was the one who pulled him out of the mud, time and time again. When trouble came, I was the one who held it all together, without hesitation. I thought if I just loved him enough, eventually, he would give me even a sliver of warmth in return. But I was wrong. Love, however heartfelt, is never a guarantee it will be returned. The noise outside my door had finally stopped. I looked through the peephole and saw Ethan and Chloe slumped on the doorstep, pale and passed out. I didn't hesitate. I called 911. Years of indulgent, high-fat, high-sodium, high-sugar meals, combined with their emotional breakdown and stress overload, had finally caught up with them, sending their bodies into collapse. Later, the doctor told me, they may never fully recover. Weakness will probably become their new normal. I gave a small smile. That's none of my concern. As I was leaving the hospital room, Ethan managed to whisper a weak phrase, Mom, I'm sorry. I paused and turned just slightly. You're right, I said quietly. You should be sorry for being an ungrateful parasite. I turned and walked away. Behind me, I heard the sharp beeping of the monitor. A cluster of nurses rushed into the room. I stood outside, watching the chaos unfold behind the glass, just an observer to a story I no longer belonged to. Maybe I never really had what people call a family. My phone rang. A familiar name lit up the screen. Where are you? I'm coming to pick you up. The moment I heard Leonard's voice, something in my chest, tight and sore for so long, finally softened. I took a deep breath, wiped the last traces of emotion from the corner of my eye, and walked toward the hospital entrance. Soon, a dark sedan pulled up silently in front of me. I raised a hand and smiled. Long time no see. Leonard smiled back from behind the wheel. It's been too long. Do you think it's time we finally got serious? I didn't answer right away. I just opened the door and slid into the passenger seat. Leonard was the kind of man who radiated calm just by being near him, not loud or overbearing. He never tried to be the center of my life, but he was always the one who lit it up when I felt most lost. In the days that followed, I began to get used to his presence. He took me to small-town book clubs and encouraged me to sign up for a pottery class at the local art center. We took walks together in the mornings and cooked in the evenings. He would listen to me talk about Goofy and let me share my darkest memories when they surfaced. I started redecorating the house, stripping away all the remnants of a life I once curated for someone else and replacing it with my own tastes and joy. The kitchen, once a battleground of obligation, became a place of peace, where I now cooked only for myself. In the backyard, I planted an herb garden: mint, rosemary, and lavender. They grew under the sun, and so did my spirit. Leonard never made grand promises. He didn't speak of forever. He just stayed, quietly, steadily, living beside me, not for me. Sometimes we'd sit on the porch with a cup of tea in hand, and he would gently take my fingers and say, "Eleanor, you've finally stopped living for everyone else." I would smile and nod. Yes, I was finally living for me. One afternoon, I received an anonymous package. Inside were internal documents, executive-level personnel changes at the Graham Group. Ethan's name had been completely erased from all project files. I didn't ask who sent it. I already knew. Leonard didn't say a word either. He just made me a fresh cup of coffee and placed it quietly on the table, as always. I picked up the cup, looked at him, and smiled. "Thank you." He just smiled back, saying nothing. In that moment, I realized something. True happiness doesn't always arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it just comes after the storm, in the form of a steady hand quietly reaching out for you, 60 years of life. And finally, I was no longer trapped within the walls of a broken relationship. As for what comes next, I don't know if my twilight years will read like a romantic fairy tale, but I do know that I am now writing my own story. That evening, we sat together in the backyard, listening to old jazz records as the sun slowly set behind the trees. "Eleanor," Leonard asked gently, "do you think you'll ever fall in love again?" I turned to look at him, my eyes calm and certain. Maybe I already have.